You know what? That was so good. Shall we play it again? Yeah, fuck it. Let's play it again. I don't care. This is my show. We do what I want, and that's going one more time.
It's my life in the box in front of me. Take it off in my arms, it's the soul of me. You walk by, as you see me laying face down.
Good evening, guys. Welcome to episode 2 of the Weekly Steelchair Podcast. Tonight, joined by William here on the side. How are you, my friend? How are you doing?
Not too bad.
Glad you can be with us. And obviously, guys, that is our brand new intro for the show, produced by Tim, Niagara Reds, who hosts the Dimes and the Buckets podcast with Rach and Greg, who would have been on tonight. Sadly, they're not around, but it doesn't really matter. You've got the Weekly Steelchair. This is the groundbreaking episode that we spoke about last week that we're waiting on. If you haven't watched last week's episode, do give it a shout. It was myself and Vicky. We were previewing Survivor Series, which I'm just going to cut the wrap up now and just discuss it. Survivor Series was fairly decent, some solid matches, but we can do that at a later date. Frankly, that's not what we're here about. We're here about something very important. Particular era in 2002 started the Ruthless Aggression era. Raw and SmackDown were going into a divide. It was all about competition because there was no one around. Yes, there was Impact at the time, TNA Impact at the time. They were doing weekly pay-per-views, but they weren't particularly, at the time, good enough to go and make a name for yourself. It was more for the indies. No disrespect to the indies, but at the time, it was best for them. You were never going to realistically make it on Raw or SmackDown at the time. So how did WWE come around with that? They did the draft. The original draft, obviously, I can remember that, Chris, like clear as day. The Rock was the first draft, and he literally put Vince McMahon to shame. It was golden. Before we move on to the main topic of tonight, I just want to ask William, what was your original thoughts on the original draft and what would later become the Ruthless Aggression era?
I feel like it was definitely something that was needed. It was very interesting to see because obviously you had all these stars coming into one place. You're like, how can they get good airtime? What can happen? Everyone's into one place. What are they going to do? And then obviously the draft comes in. It happens. It allows a fresh lease of life onto new talent and help develop the careers of many superstars that we're going to go on to by giving them a chance where they might not have gone in. But yeah, it was definitely needed at the time, and it was definitely one to rewatch at times as well.
It's just pure golden. There's certain moments in on that original draft that stand out for me. One obviously is The Rock's reaction to the first draft, where he literally organized a crowd-wide chant of "You are an asshole" to Vince McMahon, which was pure genius. Vince takes it so well. It's absolutely fantastic. And obviously the key draft for Raw being obviously The Undertaker kickstarts Raw's era, because obviously they needed a star to counteract The Rock. But for me, it was the fact that Raw got Stone Cold and they got Brock Lesnar, who we'll be coming on to very shortly in terms of where we lead on. But the key point, obviously, is fast forward a couple of months, The Rock wins the world title at Vengeance, which leads to the beginning, realistically, of the SmackDown 6 era, which is Rock versus Lesnar, because you need somebody who's going to stand above the roster. But you need a clear mark, which is obviously Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit. Yes, I can say his name because WWE actually unbanned him, which is a shock. Eddie Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, Edge, and Rey Mysterio. I'll be coming later on towards the end of the show. I'm going to be asking you later on, your favorite matchup, involving the 6, and how would you rank them? In your opinion, what is number 1, number 6? I'm going to ask you that towards the end of the show. But just from the SmackDown 6 in general, who stood out for you from when that era began? Who, out of the 6 in general, who did you think was the right backing there?
To be honest, it was interesting to see even just the dynamics between all of them. I'd say the top one, in my opinion, is Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle will always be kind of one of the top performers I've ever seen happen.
What's up, Keen?
In my opinion, Then you'd probably go Eddie next, and it's just a shame, obviously, that his life ended so shortly, because God knows what could have happened moving on. And then I suppose I'd go then Rey Mysterio. Edge was good, but he hadn't reached the heights, and obviously it would help propel him, but he hadn't reached the heights of what he would go on to become.
Agree.
And Chavo was a good support player, let's be fair. He was one that did need a hand, but he'd probably bottom of the 6 if you're being fair.
Yeah. So you would have so you're just to touch on your order again, you go Angle, Eddie Guerrero, Benoit, Edge, Mysterio, Chavo, or Mysterio, Edge, or Mysterio,
probably
Edge,
Mysterio, Edge.
Mysterio, Edge. I get that. I completely understand your point of view. I think if I had to do it, I think and you're marking, I'd probably mark it in the same way. I think the fact is, it's not just any. You mentioned dynamics. It's they built it really well on relationships. Where you had at the time Angle versus Benoit, like didn't matter what happened every week on SmackDown at the time on a Thursday night. Angle versus Benoit would fight for anything. It was complete intensity. It was brilliant to watch. Good technical matches, shoot fighting as well. It's just something that Kurt Angle spoke about a lot. It was a lot of shooting involved because there was a lot of personal issues there between Benoit and Angle, which is understandable. We also spoke about, in an honest opinion, jealousy. This derived from the creator of the SmackDown 6, which is Paul Heyman, which he deserves complete respect on this. The fact that he recognised this lot, like he was in an interview and it was, and Raw was going down the approach of Triple H is going to be your world champion, Shawn Michaels is going to feud for him, and the main talent was just going to Raw like the heavy hitters. So Paul Heyman went, fine, okay, since I'm the lead writer of SmackDown, all I need is 2 guys. Just give me Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. That's all I need. Just give me Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, and I will show you why they should be on Raw.
And I suppose the main thing that also kind of helped him was around that time, Stone Cold taking his ball and walking home. That put the whole company in a free flux. That just then he was like, look, I can do this with this side and you can deal with that side. Give it even parts on each end, because back in the creative meetings, they were just solely focused on Raw and they actually had to split it up, and that was just the time and the moment.
I like the fact that it was so keyed on Raw, like, because Raw's the flagship show. Raw's expected to outperform SmackDown every week, but as soon as they started booking the SmackDown 6 in, whether it be tag matches, single matches, fatal 4-ways, triple threats, the viewership from Raw was at the time impressive numbers. But as soon as it got to Thursday night, that was it. Like, Thursday nights was over doing Raw. Like, they didn't know how to handle it because it was supremely talented, like, superstars, and only 2 of them, realistically, you could say, were in their prime. I think at that time, no disrespect to Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit. Benoit wasn't in his prime at that point. I think Benoit maybe later 2003 into 2004 was in his prime. But Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle at that point were definitely in their prime. And you could tell by the fact that they two were the main focus for, like, title matches, down the line, the better feuds. And obviously for me, we're going to come down to favourite matches later on. But for me, one that stands out is Guerrero versus Benoit as for a US title match is one of them, but Angle versus Benoit the Royal Rumble in 2003, that says all, like, where they went down the line for me in terms of creative approach. But then you've also got SummerSlam, Rey Mysterio versus Kurt Angle was also another great match. It just shows how good they were, that they were able to maintain it and change things up. So I say to the man who actually created my intro, this is him. Good evening, Tim. Hope you're doing really well, mate, and thanks very much. I want to ask your opinion on one particular member of the SmackDown 6, though, because you did mention about he wasn't particularly great at this time, but he was still effective. But he would go on to do better things as the Ruthless Aggression era progressed, and that was Edge. But no, I don't disagree with you. I think Edge's best work was when he turned heel on Raw in 2004.
It's when he had an affair.
Very, very true. Very, very true. We've already hit the controversial moment. Let's go full shebang. You're right. In terms of that, like, the affair kicked in, he got a lot of heat, but it benefited him so much because it led to that steel cage match at Unforgiven. It led to the Money in the Bank cash-in. Funnily enough, a New Year's resolution after the Elimination Chamber match, which I have never forgotten to this day. I still remember every moment, and it was just great to watch. That was his best work, but even during the Ruthless Aggression era as a SmackDown 6, he still produced good matches. Like the no disqualification match against Edge for me, Eddie Guerrero was my standout. But what about you? What's your overall thoughts on, even during that time, because he was still a babyface, but he was a bit of a tweener in a way.
It's hard to necessarily put it, because I don't have too many memories of him before he turned heel, to be honest. He never stood out in my mind. I remember he was always part of tag teams for some strange reason. Like, you go back, he started off with Christian, then he goes on his own, then he won the tag team titles with Hulk fucking Hogan. Then he was great at, then he was part of the SmackDown 6. He was a tag team with Rey Mysterio for a time. It's just, for some strange reason, whenever I remember him, he was always in tag matches.
I get that. I think I was lucky enough that I can remember most of his singles matches. Like I was just that lucky. Like, even though I rewatched them, I still have the memory because those are the matches that I initially grew up like clear as day remember. Like, even though I still had the Attitude Era, it was just brief moments of the Attitude Era until I got to like WrestleMania 17, which is the one that I still say is the greatest WrestleMania of all time. Quote me on that, I don't care. But Edge at that point, he was a tag team. He was a tag team specialist, but the matches they had as a singles wrestler, like Lance Storm, SummerSlam 2001 for me is underrated, versus Test at Survivor Series in the unification match, underrated. But other than that, like you said, it sort of got down. Like, he had a very boring match against Booker T at WrestleMania 18. Like, no disrespect to Booker T, but it was over nothing. Like, it was like the worst stipulation ever. It was about a brand deal
like a shampoo commercial or something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's bollocks.
Oh.
But it was good to see that he finally grew into his own, at least when the SmackDown 6 came along in certain singles matches. Like, I think the one that helped him the most probably would have been Eddie Guerrero. Like, the feud just built and built and built and kept going. Like, Unforgiven stood out. Even Andrews mentioned Angle versus Benoit Unforgiven was a beautiful match. It was. And I don't disagree. But the one that I remember, with all due respect, is Edge versus Guerrero, because it got so heated for the two of them that it built to this amazing feud that it just kept building and building and building. And it led to the tag title creation, which was won in spectacular fashion by Angle and Benoit. Although, in my honest opinion, it shouldn't have been them that won the titles originally, but the fact that it was those two that won it anyway is not a bad thing, because it's the two best technical wrestlers at the time. You want a technical tag team, in my opinion. They're the best ones are the technicals. Sorry, Hardy Boys fans. I know I'm a Hardy Boys fan, but still, like, technical ones are the best. And then Keen's just reiterating one of my favourites, Benoit versus Angle. Absolutely. I completely agree. But this is what I want to come on to, is SmackDown's pushing of the 6. It wasn't just Paul Heyman that fully backed it. It was the then on-screen GM, like Stephanie McMahon. She was fully behind this. Even Brock Lesnar, who was at the time not long in the business, young world champion, even he was fully behind this because he saw where it was going, because he knew he would thrive off the competition, because you saw he was just working with the big guys. He didn't particularly work with a smaller guy that well, except RVD at King of the Ring. Yeah. But as soon as the SmackDown 6 started to build up, you sort of like, I don't know if you've watched it, but he had the match against Rebellion, where he faced Edge, and it was a handicap match for the WWE title. That was a very good technical match as well. But it showcased Lesnar could work with anybody at that time. Now he's just suplex, F5, suplex, F5, repeat. It's okay at times.
When except for some reason, nearly every Survivor Series that he was champion, like when he was against Bryan and against AJ, those were the two times he showed up and began to work again.
Yeah. That's what I want from a guy like him. But obviously, at that time, Lesnar was benefiting from the fact that he had full support. He was a big guy. He won a national wrestling championship. And obviously, the dream was Angle versus Lesnar. But they built it so well by actually, in a way, distancing from Angle and Lesnar. They distanced it so well because they had Lesnar feuding with virtually anybody that they could get their hands on. But other than Lesnar and Angle at the time, who do you think would have worked in that main event role had those two not been around? Say the SmackDown 6 didn't exist with Kurt Angle, for example, and Lesnar wasn't pushed into a main event slot like he did. Who do you think could have been like somebody with a filler, or do you think it had to be Kurt Angle purely because at that time he was at the absolute top of his game?
I think it kind of had to be Kurt Angle. Now, there would have been a few maybe other technical guys that could have fit in the SmackDown 6. Like, you could have had, say, a Chris Jericho or a Christian in there. Maybe even like a Lance Storm or someone like that could have worked for that dynamic. They could have had proper matches, but I don't think you would have seen it reach the exact same heights if you didn't have Kurt Angle, because he was just... And heck, even though he was probably completely off his head at times on medication in order to try and get through, it's such a shame in a way that he broke his neck so many times at that stage and couldn't stay fully fit. But when he was available, I think he was just... There wasn't many people on his level across any company, anywhere in the world.
Yeah, I agree. What's your opinion on this comment by Billy, which, to be fair, I think is a very accurate... Well, I would say accurate on to many extents. This is Billy's comment. I'd argue Kurt Angle is close to or better than Shawn Michaels as the best in-ring performer. Now, Shawn Michaels is on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
He's on the Mount Rushmore, but in terms of where you'd put Kurt Angle...
They're definitely close. I wouldn't say... He was probably slightly better in the ring technically, but in terms of performing his role and just natural... I won't say natural charisma. I just think nobody nearly had the charisma that Shawn Michaels had. There was just something special about him. Not saying there was nothing special about Kurt Angle. He's one of my favorites. I just don't think he's at... Like, if Shawn Michaels is here, I think Kurt Angle is here. But then again, Shawn Michaels is... It's kind of like my number one. He's one guy I've always loved, and I can't tell you why. I just did when I was growing up, and it was just, yeah.
I don't blame you. I mean, you're a HBK guy. I love Shawn Michaels, but I'm not going to say much except from '97 as a screw job. But I'm a Bret Hart fan. But everyone that knows me knows I'm a Bret Hart fan. Like, absolutely love Bret Hart. He was slightly before my time, but I always went back and watched that era because like the new generation was when it was at its peak of great matches, and that's what he was pretty much involved in. But that's a dream match I'd love to have seen: Bret Hart versus Kurt Angle. That would have been testament.
At least we were lucky enough to say that we did get Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels in that WrestleMania match. That was just
what a sell job for the top rope angle slamming in, obviously the tap out, the ankle lock at the end.
Man,
full on sell
great
job.
Match.
Full on, like, amazing. What's Andrew saying? What are you saying, fella? I think because of how well established Kurt was by that point, I think it wouldn't have worked for him behind the project. He was technically sound. He was an interesting character and a perfect foil. Yeah, I completely understand that. I just thought I would roll it out there. Like, if you could potentially replace anybody, or if somebody hadn't been in the mix, who would you do? The reason I went for Kurt Angle purely is because Kurt Angle is that established star. You do need an established star, but think about what you could have had if you tweaked that around a bit. I do like the alternative options. Like, I would have, like, no disrespect to Edge or Chavo Guerrero, I would have swapped one of them out in a heartbeat. I would have added, like you said, a Y2J. I would have had Chris Jericho in a heartbeat because Chris Jericho, not only was he great on the mic, that would have built up so well with feuds, especially when it was calling Kurt Angle Kurt Angel, which is pure gold. But his in-ring work at that time was second to none. But obviously at the time he was on Raw, he was getting put massively through Hell in a Cell matches, and then again, that Hell in a Cell, I remember watching that was pure gold. I do find this a spot on comment. The entire project as a whole was built on showing that technician could also could draw also to stick up Vince's arse. Easy.
I think it was a bit lucky in a way. Not full luck. You make your own luck with the technicians. But if you look at how he chose some of them, like Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio deliberately went because they realized, hey, look, on Thursdays we're getting a lot more Latino followers. Why don't we do that? They didn't necessarily ever expect them to reach the highs they did, but they were just like, they took the ball and ran. And you could argue then Chavo went because, I mean, was he Eddie's nephew?
Eddie's nephew, yeah.
Always get confused on. There's a lot of lineage in that. I always get confused.
I don't agree with the Guerrero family's all over the place. Even I'd get confused.
If you look at that, they just got kind of not lucky. He chose his main champion again with the way Brock Lesnar worked out because Stone Cold took his ball and went home. They're lucky in that sense. And then they had the two other main stars in Angle and Benoit.
Mm-hmm. Is there any? I put down as a topic tonight because I really wanted to get your opinion on this, because Raw at the time would go on to have the likes of Raw would go on to have Triple H versus RVD as a top feud. They would have Shawn Michaels would return at Survivor Series and begin to become a full-time role. He won the world title at Survivor Series 2002. They also stupidly, because I love Eric Bischoff, I think he's a genius, but the fact that he retired the Intercontinental title at No Mercy, like, really questionable decision, but it just shows like they were really testing everything they can to avoid losing to SmackDown, because obviously Raw was the crown jewel. But at that time, do you think there were any other benefits to the six besides pushing Raw, like in terms of, because it was particularly Taker and Lesnar were doing their own thing, but the draw was the six. They were pushing week after week after week. Do you think there was any other benefits to them?
I suppose as a whole for the show, in order to get offered and get ratings, I suppose it helped push on their careers a bit further and make them into bigger stars, which they could say, look, we've helped. Because let's see, who was there again? So you had Kurt Angle, who came in the door through WWE. You had Benoit from other brand, from WCW, and Eddie that was across the way in WCW.
That's right.
I suppose they took the majority from WCW, although Edge was from their own, but Ray was from WCW. But then again, none of them were ever really reaching the heights. I suppose
Edge never worked out at WCW either.
No, not Edge. I was thinking of Ray, but I never said his name. Yeah, I don't know if there really was much except for actually saying, look, we can make these bona fide stars if we just get given enough time, and just having the two brands just gave him enough time, and who was able to push the other brand to try and perform better, which they did sometimes, but I suppose that's the only real benefits. Get more people watching.
Do you think the consistency in their matches as well was another benefit as well? Because at the time, whether it been like for example an 8-minute match, or if they had stretched it to like say a 13-minute TV show, TV match, obviously TV tape-in, or even when they went live at certain stages, to then go in a 20-minute match at pay-per-view, do you think the level of consistency is why the Raw approach, for example, changed? Because if you look at it the way like Raw at that time was all about the heavy hitters, but they did start to tweak it a little bit. They started to try and mold a few of the slightly similar molded athletes. They just couldn't do it.
Yeah. Maybe. I suppose they saw a winning formula across the way and were like, if this is working, we might try and form it onto our own brand. But I think you've got to have a specific type of mindset and a specific person to do it. And you can't just copy and paste the same thing onto your next brand and expect the same results. I think you've seen that throughout even though people would argue they do the exact same thing over and over again when you go through generations. Like if you look at Roman Reigns, then you look at John Cena, and you look at Hulk Hogan, they'll say they're exactly the same person, some people. But it takes a certain level of a performer for it to actually work. And I'm not saying that these weren't good enough necessarily on Raw, but it just didn't work the whole time.
I get where you're coming from, and I do think that's very fair. I mean, because I remember the initial drafts, for example, when as it further progressed on, like with the SmackDown 6, like 2003 and 2004, when you saw the likes of Shelton Benjamin move to Raw, for example, that was a way to say, well, we have to get some technical wrestlers on Raw because we don't have enough. Like Chris Jericho, great, like RVD to an extent as a hybrid technical wrestler, like. They had to try and mix them in, and at the time, frankly, Shelton Benjamin, Kurt Angle was fantastic. Charlie Haas, phenomenal. Shelton Benjamin on his own was just unreal to watch as a talent, and I think he was perfect to go onto Raw. But I just like the way that they would eventually include him and Haas as Team Angle. Like it gave Angle a stepping stone. But for me, I think the one that really should have got a better push at the time, but I felt it was just a little bit undone, was obviously because of the name was Chavo Guerrero. I know that sounds a little bit controversial, but I think I look at the fact that Eddie Guerrero, solid. Chavo Guerrero was unfortunate that he had the namesake of his uncle. And that's no disrespect. It's just the fact that Eddie Guerrero, when you think of the name Guerrero, your mind immediately goes Eddie. Nobody realistically thinks Chavo. Nobody really does. But as the years went further on a bit, like he's reign as Cruiserweight champion, for example, and then ECW champion, which is a farce anyway. But he showed he was very sound in the ring. So I'm thinking, why didn't he get a chance to maybe do a bit more? Like,
I suppose it's probably because one of those where they'll say, oh, not everyone can be a big star. And they just, maybe a mix of his, let's be honest, you're in WWE, will say this, his height and his weight and stuff. He was one of them smaller guys. Now you'll say, oh yeah, but Ray reached the top somehow. He benefited off of Eddie's death, let's be honest about it, unfortunately.
Yeah,
he did. And in reality, they could have pushed Chavo in that position as well, but obviously Ray was a lot more popular and had a lot more of the Latino fan base on board, so that he could sell more merch if you put it down to business sense in their mind. But no doubt, in ring, technically, I'm pretty sure he's still able to wrestle away. I know he doesn't that much anymore. I know he valeted for about 2 weeks with Andrade back in AEW a few weeks ago, but about a few months ago. But even because, sure, I used to watch wrestling all around, even trying to think back in the 2010s, I'm pretty sure he was still wrestling in Impact in a tag team with like Hernandez, and he was still technically sound and he was still solid. I just think he's always had that, but he's just missed something. Like, I'm not sure if it's the charisma or something, but...
Do you think... I'm going to open this up to the live chat as well. This is a question I'll really ask. Do you think he may have just been the wrong era? Because I look at him, say, for example, nowadays, like the best technical wrestlers are like sort of like Styles, Rollins on the main roster, as an example. But then you've got the likes of Johnny Gargano. You got Johnny Gargano in NXT, by far the best there. Like in terms of like pure quality, he's just unreal. Do you think maybe he's just in that? If he'd been in this era, like maybe if he'd been slightly younger in this era, he maybe would have benefited a bit more.
He might have benefited a bit more in terms of like NXT or out in the Indies, but I don't think he was ever going to reach anything more than say a tag team or a mid-level Carter in WWE. Now, we went to like Lucha Underground, like you said. I
haven't watched Lucha
I'll be honest, I haven't watched it properly, but no doubt he'd have. I've seen replays and highlights, and I'm like, damn, why couldn't I have watched that when it was live? Because it looked fucking awesome. as good as he was when I remembered watching Lucha Underground. I haven't watched it in a while. As good as he was,
Pentagon Jr. is better.
Sure.
That's a lot. Like, he's the best wrestler to come out of Mexico in the past decade. I'm actually going to throw that out there. I honestly don't care. Like, he's that good. But I'm just trying to think in terms of what he could have done, because favoring wise, he wasn't really going to get much. I mean, the tag title run, like the 2 runs as tag champions with Eddie Guerrero, they were solid. But it wasn't to the extent that they were solid matches that made them a great tag team. It was the sheer shithousery. Like it was the fact that, like, whether it be shithousing Kurt Angle by when he, for example, when he broke his neck at WrestleMania 19, they shithoused him by painting a mustache on his portrait, stole his gold medals, or just when they mocked Team Angle, like, in matches, like stealing the tag titles before the ladder match, as an example. Like, it was just sheer shithousery, and I think that was not to discredit their in-ring work, because their in-ring work was superb. But I just think when you think of Los Guerreros, you think of, as Andrew says it in a perfect way, weekly shenanigans. That's genius. But does anyone remember? I'm not going to share my screen because it's on YouTube, and you know what YouTube's like. They cry, bitch, and moan. But does anybody remember the way they built up the Los Guerreros original promo? Like the original, like, for the entrance video, and like the way they done the lie, cheat, and steal video. Like, it was actually them walking on a golf course. It was so classy.
Latino. Oh.
You just put nostalgia in my head. I'm gonna move on, because there is one match I really want to discuss, because I think you cannot discuss the SmackDown 6 without discussing this one match. And before people think, no, don't worry, it's not too far down the line. It's only 2 years into the future. WrestleMania 20. As you said, the number 1 and number 2 by far we've pretty much agreed on it. The number 1 and number 2 of that SmackDown 6 was Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero. WrestleMania 20, Eddie Guerrero defending WWE champion versus Kurt Angle, number 1 contender. The way Angle lost that match was sheer brilliance. That's creative genius. But the match itself, is why I fully agree why those two were the best. But that match itself, what was your overall thoughts on that match? I know it's going back 17 years, but we've watched WrestleMania 20 back numerous times. We've watched this match back. What's your overall thoughts on Guerrero versus Angle at WrestleMania 20?
I remember, it's been a while since I've watched WrestleMania 20, but I definitely do remember the match. And I just remember kind of just sitting in, and you just kind of find yourself getting just lost in the moment, just watching it and watching how it transpires, and just get into it more, and you just, it was just enthralling. And then obviously how it finishes, like with Kurt Angle trying to hook in the ankle lock, and then Eddie, having loosened the boot earlier, just spins through it. Quick roll up. It just fit so well, and it fit his character as well. And just everything to do with it, and you can imagine just how pissed off Angle would be, and his emotions and how he sells it straight after is just, it's just brilliant.
And obviously that same night, Benoit would win the world title. Obviously, WWE don't talk about it, and that in their business idea, obviously, I understand that, right? But the difference is, this isn't WWE. This is the Weekly Steelchair. We're going to talk about that triple threat match. We're going to talk about the crippler that is Chris Benoit. But in terms of him as a performer, do you think at times he was maybe a little bit held back? Considering that he was in God rest his soul, he was only in WWE 7 years. But considering just how good he was, 1 world title reign.
Yeah, I suppose you could say he was a bit held back, but again, I'm going to say it was his size. WWE are known for not pushing the small guys until they've started being a lot better than it, but he just didn't live up to the mold. He was brilliant for putting everyone over, but they just never saw him as a big-time player. Whether or not that's a mistake, yes, of course it is. You had the feckin' Triple H reign of terror, which was a feckin' nightmare for many a year during that period, where you could have given many different guys a better chance. But he definitely could have gotten more title reigns, but I just think he was almost too good a performer. That he wasn't that big of a star.
Yeah, there was I alluded to earlier on the show, the comment about jealousy. I alluded that it was an interview what Paul Heyman had, and he actually spoke about the differences between Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, and Chris Benoit, and he said these three were by far the best technically of the six. The ones that's going to make the best draws is most likely going to be these three. He didn't particularly rule out Rey Mysterio, but he was basing it on those three in terms of like technical ability, slightly bigger and obviously more recognized than arguably Mysterio was at the time.
Oh yeah, no doubt. When it originally started, sure, they had originally planned for Rey Mysterio and Chavo to basically just be the face of the cruiserweight division. They never thought that they could reach anything higher than even that, and then.
Exactly. But the jealousy comment stemmed from the fact that we all know Chris Benoit at the time was suffering from substance abuse. Sad in his life, he was steroids, amongst other things. I don't know what else he was taking, but steroids was a common one that followed with him. But and Paul Heyman in a comment said the reason that Benoit was actually on the steroids is because he couldn't match the physical stature of Kurt Angle. He couldn't match him in the physical stature or even the intensity. Now, we all know like the intensity of Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit is intense, but Kurt Angle's intense levels unbelievable. But he spoke about that to a degree, and he said like he actually thought that jealousy is what stemmed the Angle Benoit feud and made it so much better when he was in like Team Angle versus Benoit. It gave him that sense of like maybe I can do better, but maybe it was the background of magic hands. That's all I'm saying. It stemmed from that jealousy. What's your thoughts on that?
It would make sense. Let's be honest. There's a whole line of ways that you look at wrestling, and most of the big matches, the best matches, have some line of, I won't say hatred, but some sense of realism go into it, where they always the top performers, they always want to be the best in one sense. And obviously, if Benoit, if he's facing someone that's kind of, let's just say, even though it was a great feud, he was facing like MVP, he isn't going to be as hyped going in with someone who he sees as not as technical, not as good as him. Whereas if he sees himself as, all right, this is Kurt Angle, this is a challenge, oh my God, I have to get myself up for him, it's always going to make the quality of the match better because he believes that he has to reach these next levels. They're going to put more and more into it each time.
Yeah.
And Kurt Angle's Kurt Angle.
That's one way of putting it. He's just an absolute genius. I admire the technical work. I mean, I hate what Benoit did. The fact that I used to use this guy in SmackDown versus Raw every time when I was younger, like Benoit, I'd literally use Benoit that much just because I enjoyed putting people in the crippler crossface. It's just how it is.
I use Rey Mysterio. I can't help it. I was a vast guy. I liked running.
To be fair, I can understand wearing masks. I mean, being an Arsenal fan, you got to hide the pain. You got to hide the pain, eh? Like
hey, what pain? We're in 5th position right now. Where are you?
Keywords right now. I just had the front. That is literally the banner you get back and forth on here. You aren't wrong about Mysterio though. Like, no disrespect to like how he was in the ring, like who he was up against. Pretty much everybody in the ring was far bigger than him, stronger, heavier. They weren't as over as him. But the unfortunate circumstance, obviously, was the passing of Eddie Guerrero in 2005. Eddie Guerrero was booked to become the world champion. He was booked to win it from Batista. But like Eddie Guerrero, his heart attack, obviously that led to that change of plans, and obviously Batista got injured. Thank you, Mark Henry. Because frankly, because all due respect to Batista's title reign at that time, it was becoming a bit stale. It was becoming a little bit stale, and you can thank Melina for that, you dirty hole. You can thank her for that. But nobody was really coming in. Angle winning the world title was great because he was able to at least carry the world title reign through. But Mysterio benefited from the passing, obviously, with the Royal Rumble win, which shouldn't have been him in the first place. It should have been Randy Orton. Should have been Randy Orton versus Kurt Angle WrestleMania main event, in my opinion. Because they were never going to do Undertaker, which is shambolic. In my opinion, it would have been great to have Angle versus Taker as a WrestleMania main event, because that was a brilliant.
At least you got it at No Way Out.
That was a quality match. Like 30 solid minutes of just brutality, like back and forth. It was great to watch, but Mysterio benefited that much. His title reign said it all.
It was such a shame as well, even that WrestleMania match between the three of them, because it was just too short. Why couldn't they have gotten even 5 more minutes to put everything in? Because it had the potential to reach such great heights, and you could see the ability of everyone, and they had to rush through it.
I know. And it's purely because they cut time. They're like cutting time on certain matches that should never got. Well, obviously the standout match was the hardcore match. Like maybe the WWE title match, that was an impressive one, but that world title match should have got longer. And I agree with you. I'm actually going to. I think the match in total was around near enough 15 minutes. I'm actually just going to double check right now how long it was, because it's been a while since I've watched it. Like it's been a while since I'm going to actually get the official run time for that match, and I'll tell you exactly how long this match went for. So I'll just go for it here. Yeah, you literally say that wasn't even close. It was less than 10 minutes. It was a 9 minutes 19 seconds
for a triple threat match.
Yeah. But look, these are the title matches, right? So on that night, you had roughly a 7-minute match for the World Tag Team titles. Kane and Big Show versus Carlito and Chris Masters. That was a shit match anyway. JBL versus Benoit. JBL won it. That was less than 10 minutes. That match was 30 seconds longer than the world title match. The women's title match was 30 seconds less, 8 minutes 48. You're going to be shocked at this, by the way. The casket match between Taker and Mark Henry was 9 seconds longer. The no holds barred match, Michaels versus Mr. McMahon, that was 18 minutes 22. So that was more than 9 minutes long. And obviously the WWE title was a full 13 minutes longer. Yeah. That and this is top of their game talent, and you've restricted them to 10 minutes.
Yeah, even if you could have just taken 2 minutes away from the main event, 1 minute away from the casket match, even you just give them 12 minutes rather than 9, they can just do 1 or 2 extra flings just to take it from here to here. It's such a shame.
I love this comment. I still go back. I still use Benoit as my first draft pick. Manager mode on SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 was GOAT. Marco. Nice to see you, mate. Nice to see you. And obviously you can see purple is the signature. That's how we go. And obviously, if you haven't seen it, I'm just going to remove us from the screen just so you can see our background. This is immense. I'm just going to take us out for 1 second.
Whoa.
WrestleMania 34, isn't that one? New Orleans?
Yeah.
I'm not even going to talk about it. I will at a later date when we go through worst WrestleManias. I will be doing a show on worst WrestleManias, and that is one of them. That is one of them. It was crap from start to finish.
27, though.
Even William knows. That's all I'm saying. We're going to push on, though, because that seems to be my catchphrase on this. I absolutely love it. Yes, that. Exactly. Great stage, underwhelming. If only it had the booking of, say, WrestleMania 17, a proper WrestleMania. Cheap plug. That signature catchphrase, we're just going to push on. Absolutely love that phrase. We're just going to push on. From that era, SmackDown 6. Oh, for fuck's sake. All right, because he's asked. Can't believe I'm going to have to ask this. William.
Who do you think? Roman Reigns. Your favorite, Reece. Your favorite.
No, it's not. No, it's not. If you want the real head of the table, you go for the real dude. There you go. That's a man right there.
What's his name, Reece?
That's The Rock, mate.
Yeah.
He's the real head of the table, and I can't wait for WrestleMania when he turns up, Rock bottoms that bitch, puts him in a sharpshooter, and Reigns taps out. That's how
that ain't happening until Hollywood, though.
Yeah, good point. Although, to be fair, it would be cool to see The Rock just come back one more time with a Hollywood theme song.
Yeah.
Because that is, like, I love The Rock's theme song from 2000 to mid-2001, and then back again in 2004. But the Hollywood theme from 2003 was just sheer genius. Because that was unexpected. But then again, that's later down the line. Keen, you've ruined it by bringing up head of the table. I hate you. Once, lifetime only. Know your damn role. I'm not even going to finish it because I'll make him cry.
And shut your mouth.
I'll let him have it this one time.
Coming from the guy that dressed up as him for Halloween.
He's not wrong. He actually did. He had the fanny pack and everything. He did. Black jumper with the fanny pack was Chili Billy Willy. That was him. That should be your new name on here. Chili Billy Willy. Who knows? No, that's not going to ring. That won't ring. And I'm the king of Scotland, England, and Northern Ireland. No, that wouldn't work anyway. I'd probably get killed. Anyway, from the 6 itself, what was? I want to say I did it to Vicky last week. She didn't like it because I asked her random questions. But then I've got questions for you that I expect you to answer. Every guest is going to do it. I don't care. You're on my show. It's my rules. But from that, involving the 6, and it doesn't have to be the 6 against each other. It can be any involvement. But what was your favorite match or matches that involved the SmackDown 6?
I'm trying to think now. Survivor Series 2002, the tag with the 6 of them is an amazing match. Kind of a coincidence that it was kind of one of SmackDown's only matches where they had all SmackDown superstars, one of the very few. Mm-hmm. Where they're just like, well, if you've got this Elimination Chamber, we're just going to put the 6 of our best guys out there and show you how to do it. Which was amazing.
Cheap plug, guys. Survivor Series 2002. Elimination tag team match.
Oh. Honestly, great pay-per-view. What a pay-per-view. Another one that I enjoyed, and it's not one many people think of, is an I Quit match between Chavo, Guerrero, and Rey Mysterio. Now, this was obviously just after Rey had lost the title match. It just kind of happened on a SmackDown where I remember it was kind of one of my first times actually watching it, say, live. I was very young. But even just the way they were able to wrestle each other with then Rey using just the finish of the match, I think it was the first time where he got caught up and Rey quits himself from constantly getting hit with the chair with his leg stuck in there.
Great spot.
Looked so brutal, but looked so good as well. That one just kind of sticks out to me as well, where I think of just the younger lads. Obviously, if it's not including just the SmackDown 6, I mean, you've got fucking Kurt Angle against fucking Brock Lesnar in an Iron Man match on SmackDown. Maybe just one of the best matches ever.
By all means, you don't have to include the 6 in one match. You can go for whatever you want. Like as a just a one-on-one match involving the 6. I agree with this one. Like Angle versus Edge, crazy steel cage match, and it was when Kurt Angle was wearing the full-on like wrestling like amateur wrestling get up, and obviously he was wearing a wig holding it on, which is sheer Kurt Angle genius. Like he just knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Not for the match.
Iron Man
also,
match.
not for the match itself. One moment that was obviously obvious. Also, the match between Edge versus Kurt Angle, which meant Angle finally got his head shaved and looks amazing, bald.
Kurt Angle looks better bald than he does with hair.
Yeah.
he looked a bit scary with hair, which is a bit crazy to say about a man, but Kurt Angle did not suit hair. When he went bald, it actually fit him. But the unfortunate thing is he was losing his hair at that point or something. He actually was losing it. Like he had something, I think it was something that was generally going wrong with him. Then which led to him like loss of his hair. So they thought like the best thing to do obviously is just use a gimmick match as a legit way to avoid something further down the line for him where it could have fell out during matches.
Exactly.
Shave it there and then. Like he benefit from that in the long term. Because he wasn't winning another world title with a full head of hair.
Nope.
Not unless it was a brought back hardcore title that was retired in the right way. Hardcore ladder match. There's another one I think of because you mentioned the Iron Man match. I then think of another Angle Iron Man match, slightly shorter, but pure genius. Angle versus Shawn Michaels. I'm pretty sure they because then Shawn Michaels also had an Iron Man match with John Cena, but especially the match of Vengeance. That match of just that singles match in Vengeance when Kurt Angle went to Raw, for example, it was just a one-on-one match. They had the Vengeance, but that was a rubber match. They returned from WrestleMania, but they did have an Iron Man match at one point. I can't remember if it was televised or not. But the match of the WrestleMania match stands out, but the one of Vengeance is the one that I remember because that was it was more creative, more involved, and obviously Shawn Michaels got the win. That's not why I prefer it more, but it was the fact that there was more spots in that stood out, except from the WrestleMania one had the great tap out, the top rope angle slam. This had that super kick from out of nowhere, that unpredictability that what Shawn Michaels can do. Kurt Angle sells that with ease, which to be fair, Kurt Angle sells anything. Kurt Angle could sell a broomstick for 10p and he would make it go for 10 quid. Like that's how good he was. Good shout, actually. Good shout, Andrew. Chavo versus Eddie at the Royal Rumble in 2004 is an underrated one. Great build-up, especially when Chavo Guerrero turned on him. What do you think about that one as a shout? Eddie versus Chavo.
No, it definitely was a good match. It was a good one.
Here's a question for you. Do you think Benoit should have won that Royal Rumble? Because obviously he was banned from competing against Lesnar due to losing a title match. It was per stipulated agreement he couldn't compete. So he was forced to enter from number one. But, and then obviously he went to Raw and had that amazing triple threat match. But do you think he was the right one to win that Rumble at the time?
I mean, it's hard to think. What else do you think they could have done?
Thankfully not Bill Goldberg.
Well, that's obvious, but I mean, what do you else? I think it went on to be, it was the right decision how it went off, and obviously with the aftermath of everything he did, it wasn't the right decision because of you can't look back on it, but
you can't know.
I think because it worked out with such a good main event that it was the right decision.
That's fair. Nunzio. You know who I like if he hadn't been in a match already that night, I like that last man standing match was fantastic. For the world title, Triple H versus Kane. Bugger off. Nobody cares about the authority. He's literally putting up authority screenshots. I'm so disappointed in the man. This isn't an authority show. We're not here to talk about corruption. We're not here to talk about wasted potential of Seth Rollins at one point. Kane! The funny thing is, though, I could easily just boot him if I wanted to. He's just rolling around like a bad speed of... Yeah, you piece of crap. Oh, fuck's sake, Kane. Anyway. Did you remember the King of the Ring match? Would have been... It wasn't involving a six, but it's somebody who potentially could have been a six if he had been on SmackDown. It was Booker T versus Lashley, when obviously he won it. I know he was on Raw during the O2 era, but do you think Booker T could have been an interesting fit for the SmackDown 6? Based on the fact he actually had solid work.
I mean, he had some solid work, but I don't know if he would have necessarily lived up to the heights. I'm not sure if he had the technical ability that, say, the rest of them had. I don't know. I like Booker T within a certain reason, but the only time that I really truly appreciated him was when he became a heel and he started back in like 2006 and he became King Booker and slowly became a lot more of a heel. Other than that, I didn't rate him as highly as some of the rest of them. I always just felt like, meh.
I always thought he was solid, but it's just, I get your point. Just like he was actually a solid worker. You can thank Triple H for how he ruined him. Is there anybody else from Raw or SmackDown that potentially you could have added in? Because I know we mentioned Chris Jericho and we mentioned Christian. They're the obvious names. Is there anybody else that potentially you could think of that you put based on the roster at the time?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. The only other one, I mean, obviously another obvious name, Rob Van Dam, very easily could have sank in there and properly maintained the ship and probably gotten higher than Rey Mysterio, but obviously they needed someone of that caliber in Raw to make a difference.
Keen's going with John Cena. Andrew agrees with RVD.
Keen says John Cena, but John Cena was one of the picks that he wasn't the SmackDown 6, but he was as important for that SmackDown 6 as someone they can build in the future and build up as a young talent from OVW. He was their first choice of that SmackDown draft from OVW behind the scenes.
Speaking of
Raw shows, God the fuck knows.
Speaking of Cena, obviously, if you haven't watched it, the Ruthless Aggression series is absolutely fantastic. Season 1 and season 2, John Cena has 2 episodes. I'm not surprised, but he speaks about failure in the Ruthless Aggression era. He openly admits he failed because obviously he was wearing the as is the term that he was wearing the tights of Prototype. Yeah, exactly. It was a Prototype crap. Fucking boring. He was good in the ring though. Like in terms of his actual work, he was good. It was just that he had the personality of a gravestone. That's how bad it was. But in terms of work, it was good. It wasn't until we had the Vanilla Ice moment, which I'll have to admit, genius. Lucky that he could do that on the fly. Otherwise, he would have been. Yeah, made himself. He would have been sacked.
The fact that he just does it on the back of a bus and someone just overhears it as well.
I know. It was Kurt. It was like it was. I can't remember who it was. He said that we heard him freestyle, and it was all about like Rey Mysterio was involved. I can't remember who else was involved.
I think he said Stephanie McMahon as well.
She overheard it and pulled him forward and stopped him at the edge of the bus, saying, "Can you do a rap on this?" And he done it. He was like, "There you go." He's like straight off the bat. I mean, that's something really good. Since Keen has openly asked a question, I'll answer it because I'm fair as a host. Keen's asked just how good is Jake Paul? Well, here's a counter question. Just how good is Norwich City? There's my response to just how good is Jake Paul. He's shit. Stephanie Mann, yep, she was heavily involved. If John Cena hadn't been able to figure out his character, he was the first draft. Do you think he would have... See, because obviously he was the first draft from OVW, and that was documented because he was doing particularly well on the mic. But when he got to the main roster, he just wasn't being given the material he was suited to, so he wasn't able to mix up. Do you think if he'd been given it from day one, as well as the prototype character, if he had added a little bit of himself to the prototype, do you think the prototype could have actually worked out? Because it was, to a degree, working at OVW. It was less pressure.
I don't think so. Because I think he almost needed that knockback in order for him to get that second opportunity and not let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Here I go with Eminem lyrics. Well, I mean, they're both rappers, but I think that's where he got some of his inspiration from, no doubt. But
yeah,
I honestly think he needed just those little bit of setbacks rather than being pushed into his... Well, he was pushed into a spot he wasn't prepared for, but rather than being pushed fully, he just needed a little bit of a setback, which I think everyone usually does in the wrestling business. Not everyone goes off the bat straight away and does it, and reaches the top straight away. Even look at Kurt Angle, you could argue that he got offered the contract the first time, which then he rejected, and then he comes in the second time after that first knockback, realized the mistake, and then went, shoom.
I think the one that stood out is he spoke about his first experience of professional wrestling. It was an ECW show, and it was literally classic thrown through tables, through one opponent was getting flung into the fans, which was typical ECW. And he was like, "This isn't it." Bye.
Was it not the one as well that was it Sandman and someone else? They literally hung your man up against a cross like that, and that's why it was totally against his religion. He was like, "I'm never doing it."
Yeah, I'm totally done. Although he would then go ECW 10 years later. Coincidence? I think not.
Coincidence? He left very quickly afterwards. No.
Did you watch the Broken Skull session about Kurt Angle? And he spoke about what happened when he was in Vince's office.
I think I might have, but this might have been when it literally just came out.
He said at the time that he was his ass, his tailbone, the whole lot, it was bruised, and he was literally standing in front of Vince butt naked, literally trying to prove a point that he wanted his release because he was not in the best of physical shape. That says it all, just how bad it was getting for him. Because we spoke about the medication, which was sad, but dealing with fitness. He was at that point, he was broken.
But
of all the guys to get crucified though, Raven effect. Not this time.
Quote Raven, nevermore.
I actually like Raven. I thought he was very underrated. Could have been a little bit more though. Could have been, but then again though, if you're coming from that background of just extreme work, are you really going to adapt? Not really. I mean, only a few of them adapted really well, and that was RVD. Although to be fair, he was used to high flying. He liked weed on the side. If that's what you're into, I'm not. But I'm not against what people do. What they say, that's their approach. As we come towards the end of the show, because it's been quality, there's one thing I want to ask to you. This is your own personal opinion. The SmackDown 6, in terms of long-term approach to... Actually, before we get to that, answer that question first. I'm going to say on the Limelight, even though he was good in the ring, he was good on the mic, I'm honestly going to go with no. because his heart and his mind was not in WWE. He was elsewhere. He was just not focused.
Yeah, I think
Randy
that's
Orton would have
fair.
made it though. If he hadn't got injured.
Maybe. Trying to think who.
Because you're not going to have Deacon Batista walking about with a Bible on your neck. Although once he finally broke away from that, thank God. Like, what the hell did they do to Devon, make him a reverend? For those that don't know what I'm talking about, I'll put a picture of it up on my phone. This is just comedy gold. I mean, this is taking a great tag team wrestler and making him one of the worst gimmicks of all time. And I'll even go that as far as the Blue Meanie, like worse than the Blue Meanie. There you go. For viewers all wide, here is Devon Dudley as the Reverend Devon. Scary as fuck. Extremely scary, because in fact, when they actually spoke about the Bible, and then the one, obviously, the Billy and Chuck wedding, that wasn't.
Oh, testify! She's
It's pure genius.
Oh.
But then again, there is one other that you could use. We're in the middle of theme songs. We may as well, guys. You guys deserve it. You've watched us for an hour and 6 minutes. There's one other that, just for pure entertainment, when he turned heel. When he turned heel, this guy would have worked if he had turned heel just a little bit sooner.
Stand back! There's a hurricane coming through!
Gregory Helms, when he took the mask off and turned heel, was one of the absolute best workers for a cruiserweight. Better than Chavo Guerrero, better than Ultimo Dragon, better than Rey Mysterio, and I love these guys. I'm going to go on record and say that. Easily better than Jimmy Wang Yang, although that's not hard. better than Shannon Moore. Again, not hard. Even better than Matt Hardy version 1, who would have been actually very good in the SmackDown 6. There's another one. Gregory Helms, a little bit too late when he turned heel, was just awesome. Yes, Andrew. What's up with that? What a catchphrase. The way that he actually approached The Rock in 2003 is comedy gold. Rock's phone ringing. Hey, it's nothing. He says he knows you. Genius. It's the Hamburglar. I just love that. That's pure comedy gold. But yeah, I'm going to say on that one, if he had taken the mask off sooner and been given the role as just Gregory Helms at that point as himself, I reckon he could have worked maybe better than Chavo. No disrespect to Chavo, he suited really well, but I think Gregory could have worked because he was actually better in the ring. I think he was actually slightly better in the ring than Chavo. But his run as a cruiserweight was brilliant, especially when he said he could beat anybody.
And did the bastard.
Pure entertainment that you would then have to go 1-on-1 with the Undertaker. Stay tuned for future shows on Teddy Long as a GM. We will do a show on Teddy Long as a GM. Don't worry, just for pure shithousery. I know Keen will be up for that because Keen loves to post in our group chat feed or long gifs or posts. Like he honestly, he's addicted to it. I'm not joking. Like Keen loves feed or long. But as I was saying, before we came to, as I was going to wrap the show, I wanted to ask you a question on the SmackDown 6 as a whole. And it depends on how you take your point of view on this. The SmackDown 6, short-term or long-term, was it an actual success? Or was it actually only a success for some and the rest of them failed? Because bear in mind, some of them did get severe injuries. Only a few of them went to the main event spot. For you, success or failure?
It was kind of a success for some. However, I'm sorry if it is going to get a bit somber for a second. Ultimately, it was a failure given the two of them unfortunately kind of passed from it. Kurt Angle, in terms of his physical state, it's a shame it just didn't last as long. And it was a success for Edge. It was a success for Rey Mysterio and what I built them up to be. I mean, it made Chavo a bit more relevant. It was sort of a success for him. But I think overall, it was a success for SmackDown in the business for the first couple of years. But it could have been so much a bigger success if God bless them, the rest of them could have stayed alive.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Eddie's work with JBL stood out. Like that was a very good feud, underrated feud. That was the feud that got JBL going.
I'm just automatically thinking of that chair shot.
That Texas Bull Rope match.
Yeah.
That was undeniably underrated. Was one of the best matches of 2004. JBL was a decent champion in terms of just trying to build up each one, but other than that, he's not really relevant overall. Hey Andrew, we're actually coming towards the end of the show, but the question I'll ask it to you now. It's all right. I'll ask you now. The question is about the SmackDown 6 at the time. Who would you think was it a relative success or was that a failure in your opinion? And who do you think could have been better involved than the original 6? Could you maybe have changed that around? Who would you have booked differently? Get your comments on that one. Get your opinions. Andrew, it was 2 comments. First saying the SmackDown 6 ended WrestleMania 20, and SmackDown remained relevantly well until 2009. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think that's very fair. Considering how the last major moment of WrestleMania 20 is 2 world champions standing beside each other, like that was just a sheer genius moment. And obviously, Andrew, most talent moved on to bigger stars such as most talent moved on to be bigger stars such as Edge and Rey Mysterio. I would say Edge, going into SmackDown 6, Kurt Angle was the biggest star. Going into the SmackDown 6, coming out, Edge. What he became, undeniable. Best heel from the mid-2000s onwards that I could honestly put a line on. I don't think anybody comes close. Triple H, yeah, he's a very good heel. Randy Orton, very good heel. But what Edge did as a heel was just sheer genius.
Who went on to be bigger / better? Edge or Eddie?
Ooh. Good question. I think if you have to put realistic respect on it, I think you're honestly gonna have to say Eddie Guerrero. And the reason I say that is long before he passed away in 2005, he had so much heat. He had so much heat building for him that he was going to be a world champion had he not passed away. If he hadn't passed away, Batista's title reign, that record reign that Triple H had, Batista would then break in January 2006. Eddie Guerrero was going to break that. Eddie Guerrero was going to hold the world title until WrestleMania, and he was going to lose it. Not sure who he would have lost to. It definitely wouldn't have been Rey Mysterio. Probably could have been, who knows, it could have been a rematch from WrestleMania 20. It could have been Kurt Angle versus Eddie Guerrero in that run. Could have been Randy Orton versus Guerrero world title match. But even so, Edge's longevity, Andrew's right, Edge's longevity was fantastic. Eddie's run 2004 was on fire. Best pure wrestlers ever seen. I think that's honestly, I agree. Edge was a brilliant heel. Him and Vicky were fire. That was just sheer. That was entertaining.
That was Vicky, filthy. In a good way.
Yeah. It depends on your definition of good filth. Vince anointed Edge. The fans anointed Eddie. Yeah, that's true. The fans saw in Eddie Guerrero. Long after his death, no disrespect to Edge, 11-time world champion, 2-time world Royal Rumble winner, 4-time Intercontinental champion, 10-time tag team champion, won the US title, King of the Ring. Yet Eddie Guerrero passed away tragically in 2005, and people say his name before Edge because of how good he was. He is time-stamped. And that's why I would say Eddie over Edge on that respect. But Edge as a worker, one of the best I've ever seen. One of the best. But if you asked in terms of that run, 1 year, outdone 5. Because that 06 run to 2011 was Edge at his best. But Eddie Guerrero 2003 ended very well for him as US champion before he lost it to Big Show, which I thought was a bizarre booking decision. But he benefited from that, from going on to beat Brock at No Way Out, retained the title at WrestleMania, beat JBL by disqualification in a very solid match as well. That first match they had, and then the second match when he lost the title, it still benefited him as a worker. That whole year, 2004, did anybody realistically outshine Eddie Guerrero in 2004? I only think maybe 2. Kurt Angle at the start of the year, and then being a GM, that was awesome. And John Cena. I think John Cena at that point in 2004, at times he was outshining Eddie Guerrero because he was just, the way he was actually working with people, not off the mic, in the ring. Like their Falls Count Anywhere match, for example, that backstage brawl, I remember that. Like the frog splash, the frog splash on the limo was one of the best moments I'd seen. But you're not going to get much of it. You're not going to get much other than Eddie Guerrero. Andrew's comment. I think I'm going to close on this because it's a very good comment. Benoit moving to Raw cut the legs from under himself because Vince had no idea who the character that Heyman built up and had no idea what to do with him going forward. You know what? I honestly agree with that. Vince had no idea. And Andrew, yeah. He may have been at one point Super Cena. 5 moves of doom that would later become 6 moves of doom. Oh, you did that. Last week I wore my Randy Orton t-shirt. This week we've got Never Give Up by William.
It's my pillow. It's one of my pillows.
That's genius. What's next? Keen turns up next week when we discuss when we talk about the Authority.
In a Kane mask.
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised. But that has been episode 2. Weekly Steelchair Podcast. If you haven't seen it, the new intro is lit. I will play it as we go out because, frankly, we've already listened to it twice. We're going to get it a third time because I think it's one of our best. It's just a sheer amazing theme tune. The fact that we incorporate the absolute iconic Glass Shatters intro by Steve Austin, followed by Thorn in My Eye, the Raw theme song from 1998 up to 2001, the absolute best. Episode 3, Andrew, since you've asked, episode 3 is purely going to be around the Authority. I know. That's going to be that's going to be entertaining. But it's not just going to be the Authority from Seth Rollins. It's going to be the Authority when it originally began at SummerSlam 2013. So it would be Triple H costing Daniel Bryan the world title, which would then lead to Randy Orton becoming the face of WWE. It's going to go with that. It's going to be the unification match all the way through. We're going to discuss that next week. Anybody that wants to suggest any topics, like any particular things you want us to discuss on the Authority, by all means, just tweet the Weekly Armchair Sports Talk. By all means, we're all happy for that. Message myself, tagging Keen on Twitter, tag us. We all respond to the comments. We're very active with the followers on the channel. That's one thing we want to do, is we want to listen to the audience that we have. We've got a very good community on the Weekly Armchair Sports Talk, and that's something we want to keep going. But Andrew says he's going to rewatch. I love it. I don't care. Keen's probably going to kill me for playing it for a third time. I doubt it. But if you missed the intro at the start of the beginning, this featuring, if you actually spot it, you'll see one of my edits. If your eyes are watching, you'll see one of my edits. This is our intro video as we close out the show.
It's my life.
It's so damn good, that video. Andrew, I'm going to answer your question because that's a fantastic question. We will. Down the line, we will discuss 70s and 80s territories. I will openly, to God, promise you that. Because if there wasn't for territories, you would not have what WWE is now. Especially if your names are Roddy Piper, Buddy Rogers, Bruno Sammartino, Ric Flair, territorial worker, Hulk Hogan. You wouldn't have had mainstream wrestling without territory. So to answer your question, you're damn right. And on that note, guys, thanks for tuning in. It's been an absolute pleasure. This is episode 2 of the Weekly Steelchair Podcast on the Weekly Armchair Sports Talk. I'm Reece, that's William, my amazing guest this week. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hope to have you again. Oh, and for the record, if you don't notice on his wall, he supports the team that we're going to beat next week. It's going to be fun. And on that note, Killer Kowalski, yeah, absolutely. On that note, it's Weekly Armchair Sports Talk. And that's the bottom line, because I said so. Good night, folks.